541-1741. Call Gulfstream Motorsports for a diminished value report. Due to my 28 years experience in the auto salvage business, I'm very good with wrecks. So if your car's been involved in a wreck, call me for a diminished value report. Call 727-541-1741. You may be owed some money for the lost value of your repaired vehicle. And visit us at GulfstreamMotorsports.com.
Looking for car shows? Then look no further than FLACarshows.com. On your computer or on your mobile device, FLACarshows.com is a comprehensive list of automotive events, plus videos and news articles. Whether you're looking for car shows, cruise-ins, meetups, automotive festivals, cars and coffees, or anything else relating to an internal combustion engine, then this is a site for you. Check it out online or on your phone at FLACarshows.com.
We're here today to celebrate the 50th anniversary of our first victory at the 24 Hours of Daytona. It seems like yesterday.
It makes me feel really old when you think about 50 years, but it's like it happened yesterday. And I remember things very clearly back then. I don't remember what I had for breakfast this morning, but here we are celebrating the 50 years.
Was it special to win? Absolutely. Did I expect to win? Never. First of all, we were going to run a car that had never been run before. We were going to run in a race that Porsche had never won with any kind of normal car. They'd won with the 917s, but not with a 911. And quite frankly, we didn't know we were going to have a car till somewhere in the middle of January. Peter told me about 15 days before the race, I need for you to go to New York, pick up this car. Then we had about a week and a half to do everything we needed to do to make it pass tech inspection. That's the way we did things.
Well, Jack, without doubt, was the glue that held everything together. Peter always fancied himself as an engineer, and he would come up with some really great ideas and some really crazy ideas. It was Jack's job to interpret what Peter wanted and then put it onto the race car to make it work properly.
It was a little bit short notice, and after I looked at the field, I said, I think we're going to do pretty good. And the fact that we were racing against an identical car operated by Roger Penske made it special. And that's all it takes to make a race is two cars. As far as I was concerned, it was our car and his car.
Peter had a lot of respect for Roger, and to have a car that was equal to Roger's car was really important for Peter. I remember in the race when both cars were running, I was behind George, so we were just nose to tail, and George couldn't lose me. So he was halfway driving off the racetrack to see if I would follow. And I said, no, you're not going to sucker me into that deal. So it was really exciting for me to be able to race successfully against George Fulmer and Mark Donahue. Your car is as good as humanly possible. The minute that car rolls off the grid, it starts to go downhill. If you don't adapt to those conditions, those ever-changing conditions, you're going to go backwards. I'm talking about, the track changes, temperatures change, tires change, the engine gets hot, the engine gets cold, and that, I think, is what Brumos did better than most.
But I just know we fit, we worked good, and we won races.
I walked out in the field this morning at 9:30, and I looked out at the sea of people. And it just took me back to the first years of this Concours when Bill started, and he'd worked 12 months for that Concours. And after it's all done, and he finally worked to get everything taken down, he had to pour thousands and thousands of dollars out of his own pocket to pay the final expenses. He didn't make any money out of it. He did that for the first 2 years. And every year, he put more money into it.
About 50% of our show is centered around race cars and racing personalities. I've always been into racing. I've raced for about 35 years myself. I felt it would be an appropriate time to celebrate the career of our heroes. and allow the public to have interface with them, something you can't do at a racetrack. You can't go to the Daytona 500 and shake Jeff Gordon's hand. You can come to Amelia and meet Johnny Rutherford, Dario Franchitti, Dan Gurney, Sterling Moss. It would be like a guy into baseball being able to go up and shake Mickey Mantle's hand.
It's a wonderful event for everybody concerned. There's a great range of cars. You don't have to be a great specialist in order to enjoy them. This place is absolutely alive with the cars all around and the spectators to go with it. He just puts on a tremendous event. He works very hard at it. So does everybody else in the whole organization. It's a huge success from his point of view, and in fact, the whole organization, when he's able to write that check on Sunday night for the hospice that it supports.
Okay, listeners, welcome. You're tuned in to Nostalgic Radio Cars. I'm your show host, Robert, running your computers and Google TAN Talk 1340.com. And you can see us live here in the studios in downtown Clearwater. Don't forget to check out our website, GulfstreamMotorsports.com, where you can find out all about us. And if you missed any of our past shows, don't forget to check out NostalgicRadioandCars.com. Good evening, Juan. How are you? You're going nuts, I know.
Getting nuts.
Okay, you can turn the music off now. I can talk for a minute. And then, okay, so Juan's filling in for Ed. Ed's taking a leave of absence, so he'll be back maybe in the next week or two. In the meantime, we have a show to do, so we got a very special guest for you to come on. Let me give you a couple shout outs here. We have the FloridaCarShows.com if you want to find out where all the car shows are in the state of Florida. What did I do this weekend? This weekend, I really didn't do much. I just went down to South Florida and picked up a tractor, dragged it back for a friend of mine because he's building a really cool old, kind of a neat, I don't know, like a little nostalgic classic car place that's got some really character. He went up to Jacksonville the other day and he picked up a really cool 53 Chevy truck, set it out, some hay bales, really neat for Easter and everything like that. And I it's funny because, you see it when you're driving down the country roads in North Carolina, Georgia, places like that, you always see these old cars laying alongside of the road, right? And you go, wow, that's kind of cool, but they just sit there because that's just, they ran until they quit and then they just left them there. Well, you drive by and you go, well, that'd be kind of a neat setting for a house. Well, anyway, so he found one and he couldn't have found my friend Mark, if you're listening. Mark, hey, shout out to Marky at Cop Cars Online, by the way, if you need a good used quality police car. But anyway, so Mark set this thing up with this old Chevy truck there, and it's like late 40s, early 50s, but it just has the most incredible patina out of any car that I've ever seen, and so fitting. And then where he put it next to these trees and a bush and a hedge, it's just like it actually looked like it. You'd never know that he dragged it down from Jacksonville. But I mean, it just looks like it's been there the whole time. And of course, he found this old tractor, and I dragged that up there. But the tractor's cool and it's really neat. So early 50s Alice Chalmers, but the truck is really, 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 really cool. So anyway, having said that, Alan and I were talking today on the phone, and I'm going to try to make this quick because you know me, I'm real quick, right, Alan? Real quick. Anyway, so we're talking about this guy that used to deal and this is back in the 70s. This guy used to deal Mustang Ranch. Okay, now I had Nostalgic Auto and I was on 66th Street right by the railroad tracks, which is where my first junkyard was, or wrecking yard, salvage yard, parts yard, whatever. And that was 1982, 83 is when I started. So this other place was called the Mustang Ranch, and it was down the street a ways. And this is funny how weird stuff happens, okay? And and it was owned by a guy by the name of Guy Sutton. I think that was his name. Anyway, he moved up to Kathleen, which is up there by Webster. And I used to go up there and pillage this place and look for Mustang stuff. Nice old guy, right? And so he had moved up there. He was probably in Pinellas Park maybe a year or two, 3, 4, whatever it was. And then he ultimately moved up there. Meantime, I come down. So now I got this business going. Okay, so fast forward. So Alan sends me this article about this place called the Mustang Ranch. Did you know about this back in 1977? Now I'm thinking, well, I pretty much scoured Pinellas County pretty heavily in Hillsborough County in north, Pasco and Citrus and Hernando looking for cars all the time. So I probably ran across it, but I just couldn't remember it. Okay. Because it's like they had a guy over in Tampa, over in Drew Park called Pee Wee's. So if it didn't have a Shelby or a Boss, I probably, walked in there, looked around a little bit and yeah. Okay. So it's got a few Mustangs, big deal. Today we restore worse cars, and we parted out back in the day, I might add. So anyway, so he's telling me where this guy was located, and I said, okay, yeah. And he says, yeah, it was off 66th Street, and it's up the road there on the right-hand side. I said, well, that used to be a friend of mine's that used to have a construction business, and then he used to buy Mustang parts from me. And I said, at the time, before he was getting ready to buy the property, we walked the property. At the towards the rear of the property, we're walking along, and I happened to, and I always say this jokingly, yeah, Chevrolet parts are such pieces of crap and such junk that, besides on a quiet day, you can hear a Chevy rust. You can also trip over a part and kick up a Chevy part, and there it is laying in the dirt. On this particular occasion, it wasn't a Chevy part. It was an exhaust manifold to a Ford, but it wasn't just any exhaust manifold. It was off a 390 GT. Now, what are the odds? There's not like there's a lot of 390 GT Mustangs. This could have either been out of a Fairlane, a Cougar, a Comet, or a Mustang. Okay, so here's this exhaust manifold, and I see it laying there, and I go, wow, and I was kicking it up a little bit, and Joe walks back to me and he says, what are you doing? I said, I don't know, there's an exhaust manifold over it. And then I started looking around, and I see some other miscellaneous, some rusty valve covers, and there was a hub for a Ford Mustang, which I identified immediately, being a Ford guy. So I picked up the exhaust manifold and looking at it, and he goes, well, why are you digging that out? I mean, I was putting some effort in it, digging it out. And he goes, I said, well, because it's a 390 a GT thing. He goes, oh, well, that's mine because, I'm buying the property. I said, you don't own the property yet, so it's mine. I don't know if I still have it or not, but I probably did. But anyway, so I picked it up and threw it in the back of my truck. But it's just kind of weird. So here we are, all these years later, and I completely forgot that place was down there. And I have more stories like this. These coincidence things, these are really, really cool. So here we are. This place used to be Mustangs, kind of like a Mustang salvage yard, part yard. What are the odds of a 390? Now, I can see a 289, 302, maybe even a 6-cylinder Mustang exhaust manifold laying there. But a 390 GT, what are the odds? Okay. So just goes to show you how common they were and how they were probably just worthless. Nobody cared about any of that stuff. And today, we go bananas over this kind of stuff. Anyway, this weekend in Atlanta, speaking of Atlanta, HSR Walter Mitty, Historic Sports Car Racing, Walter Mitty Race, Vintage Car Race at Road Atlanta. I have a soft spot in my heart for Road Atlanta because that's where I got my driver's license, my racing license in 1990. Big shout out to my friends at FLT. Check out my website or my Facebook page. We are co-promoting the Moonshine Festival driving tour. That's the last week in October where we're going to be doing some crazy wild driving on the Dragon, if you will, the Charahola Parkway, which is pretty cool. Charahola, I should say, and the Rattler. And then we're going to Lake Lanier, and we're going to be staying at the Brasstown. Couple of cool places to eat, and we're going to be buzzing around in cars. And the pièce de résistance is the Dawsonville Moonshine Festival on Saturday. Oh, yeah, we will be stopping off at Lanier Raceway and, heat up some tires on your cars and slide around on the track a little bit. That's also part of the thing. But go check out the website, fastlanetravel.com, and you'll find out all about us. Okay. On that note, it's time to call our guest. Juan, go ahead and give our friend a call because he's anxiously awaiting our call. We have a very, very, I'm going to say, significant person coming on the show this evening in terms of Florida, South Atlanta, but Florida racing. A couple of weeks ago, I was up at Brumos, and they had the Brumos collection up there. Hurley Haywood's been on our show. Bill Warner, who's a big, got a real good ties with Brumos, and Ray Schaefer's been on our show, who used to work for Brumos and then went to the Porsche Experience Center. And so every one of them had a little something to do with Porsches because we're on a Porsche theme tonight. And so what we're going to do is we're going to bring this gentleman on because he was one of the guys that was very instrumental in making so that the number 59 car, the Brumos car, would be extremely successful. And I'm delighted to welcome the show. He's on the horn here. Jack Atkinson. He's the former crew chief or the crew chief for Brumos Racing. So, Jack, how you doing this evening?
Well, for a 92-year-old, I think I'm doing all right, but I don't like being 92.
Well, you know what? I got to tell you, I don't think any of us. I'm 68, and I don't like being 68 because I can't do the stuff I used to do, and that's disappointing because that's just a real mental knockout. What do you say to that?
Yeah, that's about how it is. You just have to get accustomed to being able to do what you can do and not worry about what's going away because you're not getting it back.
Well, but you're 92, so you're doing real good because you're still here and you're on my radio show, so that's even better.
Yep. I don't have much of my body left, but my brain still works.
That's
Yeah.
the most important thing, because your brain controls everything, because it's always mind over matter. Right, Jack?
Yeah, that's true.
So, Jack, give us a little background on yourself. You started with Brumos, well, actually Brundage, back in, 1957, you told me?
1956, actually,
Six.
right in 1956. I went to work for Brundage Motors of Atlanta. And as a mechanic and a parts manager and a little bit of service manager, and because it was just in an old gas station, we were just starting up.
No kidding.
Yeah.
What part of Atlanta was it?
It was out on West Peachtree, out past North Avenue. I guess.
Is that kind of downtown, or where would that be?
738 Spring Street. I can remember that. Yeah.
Okay. So is that how is that in relationship to downtown Atlanta? Just to kind of give us a geographic reference.
How was that?
So that the little gas station that you guys started at, in reference to downtown Atlanta, where would that have been roughly? North, south, east, west?
On the north side.
On the north side? Okay.
It was only about 5 blocks from Fox Theater. It was not really that far out of downtown. Nowadays, you'd be right in the middle of everything, but it was a different town at that time.
Uh-huh. Are you from Georgia originally?
No, I'm not. I was born in Massachusetts, and I started school up there, and then World War II started, and my father took a new job, and we moved to Maryland, where my parents were from. And at the end of World War II, we moved to Decatur, Georgia, because he didn't want to travel the whole country. He just wanted the state of Georgia, Florida. So, yeah, I actually went to high school in Georgia and went to Georgia Tech. I never finished, but I went there from the time I graduated high school in 51 until we left to go to Jacksonville in 59. I was taking at least one course. So I got in about 2 years of mechanical engineering. But where I got my real experience to make me a racer was working on Navy aircraft, piston engine aircraft.
Really?
Yeah, I was very familiar with F-44s and many other, everything that the Navy flew practically in World War II. And I used that knowledge all through the racing career. I really did. We made some incredible machinery that we used in World War II. And it didn't have to give up anything to any race car I ever worked on, really, except maybe the 917. But even there, they are, like the P-47 Thunderbolt, that plane just had an incredible induction system with intercoolers and all the things that we developed later for use in racing. It was all right there, So, yeah, I just kind of fell into the racing because Mr. Brundage was a racer. I had been to a couple of races at Moody Air Force Base in Georgia, where when Curtis LeMay was in charge of the Air Force, and he let the sports car people run races on their military bases, and then I'd gotten a taste of it. Really enjoyed it. Mr. Brundage was building Volkswagen specials to run at Sebring at that time, and I just actually the first time I went to Sebring was after the original Brumos Porsche Car Corporation got going, and we bought an RS-60 and went to Sebring in 1960 with Bob Holbert's father and Roy Scheckler as drivers, and finished second overall in the first race that I really ever had anything much to do with. And then after we raced in Sebring and did well, we went to the Fiesta of Five Flags in Pensacola. And it was there that I met Roger Penske, and he beat us so bad with an RSA that I told Mr. Boone right then, I said, if you want to really have a race car driver. That's true. At that time, Roger was still working for, oh golly, it leaves me now. It was a big company.
Wasn't a Chevrolet dealership up north? Is that what it didn't?
That was way before that.
Was it?
Yeah. And it's leaving me right this minute. It may come back.
Was it Xerox? No.
Huh?
Was it No, who was it? I'm trying to think.
Aluminum.
Alcoa. Okay.
Yeah, he was not long out of college. Roger is, I think, 2 years younger than I am. Not much. And boy, he could drive a race car. He really did. So we went back to see him in 61. We ran a lot of collaboration with him, but we went back to see him in 61 again with Bob Holbert and with Roger Penske as co-driver. And Mr. Brundage always liked to go after the index of performance. So we were running 1,500 cc engines, and we could only carry 26 gallons of usable fuel. So I redid the fuel system on the Spider. The first major work I ever did for the race car, I think. So we had 26 gallons usable, because when you went to tech inspection at Sebring, that's what they did. They pumped gas till the carburetor wasn't getting any more carburetor, and then of course filled it up. We were okay on that, and we went. That was the old 5.2 mile course. We programmed to do 200 laps, and we did 100 and let me think back now. I don't want to tell you wrong here. We were going 50 laps between pit stops. Yeah. And nobody could believe it. And we only finished fifth in that race. The Ferraris were much faster that year, but we had a really, really good race.
So I didn't quite understand it. So you always raced against Penske, or did Penske race with you guys one year in 61?
No, he was driving our car in 61.
He was driving your car, for the Brundage car.
Yes, he was.
Okay.
We went to Nassau, we went to Daytona, we went everywhere there was races.
Interesting.
Yeah. I just.
What do you was Penske just that good of a driver? Was he very fluid compared to some? I mean, Holbert was a very good driver at the time. And who else? Who was the other driver you said you had?
Well, Roy Scheckter.
Oh, okay.
He was a friend of Mr. Brundage's from Miami, and he was just an okay driver. But Penske, I'd put him with the elites. He could drive anything. And same with Bob Holbert.
Mm-hmm.
Later on, in my career, I was involved with Al Holbert when he learned to drive. He started with a 914.6 that we had been running in C production. It was a terrible car in C production, but he learned to drive in it. I just seemed to fall into all that. I did everywhere. I didn't start out with Peter Gregg, and actually I had left Romulus and become a BMW distributor for the Southeast, BMW car distributor. And I couldn't make that work for various reasons, but mostly we just didn't have enough money. And after that, I was doing cars for Charlie Kolb and Brett Philp and a lot of different drivers, Dr. Wilbur Pickett. I was preparing cars in my garage at the house. I had something to do. So I got involved with Peter Gregg because he had a big crash at Daytona in 1959. And, when everybody they weren't running dry sumps in the Jaguars, and they used to blow motors and just cover the track in oil. So he wanted a car. He couldn't get his car fixed in time to go to Sebring, so he came to me and asked could I help him, and I did. And I got Wilbur Pickett to let us use his car. So my first race with Peter was Sebring in 1960, I guess. or 59, was it 59? Yeah. And then we fixed his 2-liter car, which qualified for the Trans Am. We ran all the Trans Am races in 1960, and I think there were 13 of them, and we won 6, I think, and won the 2-liter championship. So that was my first ever championship. And we went from that to racing a 911 ST, which was a car that we built, I don't know, 5, 6 of them. We got ours from Porsche Austria. We had aluminum doors and deck lids, and it was pretty trick for its age for 70 miles. First car I ever worked on was Bill Stein's shop. Fell in love with them. We had won the first IMSA race they ever had the year before in a 70. I think it was a 70 or 71 914 6GT. There were only very few of them. Of course, we couldn't get it in SCCA at all, so we were real happy to see IMSA come along. And we won the first IMSA championship that year, starting with the first race at VIR. So, it worked. And as I progressed through racing, I had problems with, some of the things on the Porsche, like even before I ever knew who Peter Gregg was, I knew that Porsche engines were weak. You couldn't keep the rod bearings in either rod number 2 or rod number 5 was going to go out if you pushed the motors at all. And it took me a long time to figure that out. I think our 74 RSR was the first car that had a front wheel tank and had big enough water lines that you didn't have problems with cavitation. And that was my whole trick to being successful. Is I kept thinking of new ways to do things, better ways to do things, make the cars more reliable, easier to drive, particularly easier to drive. And right on through to the 79 car, the 935, which was just an absolute rocket ship. And that car still belongs to Dan O'Davis, and he has it in the Brumos collection in Jacksonville. And there's several other of our cars there, and a lot of our history revolves around that. Of course, Dan bought the Brumos dealership from Deborah Gray, and he did some very successful racing, but I did not race at that time. I was running a Honda dealership, living the good life. So, that's basically how it ran. But we won championships in 69, 70, 71, 72, 73, 74, 75. 76, we only finished second. That was the year we ran the BMWs. Then we went in 77, 78, and 79. So then Peter committed suicide at the end of the 79, the end of the 80 season, really. So after that, I worked in dealerships, and Bob Snodgrass taught me how to be a dealer. He really did. I don't know if you knew Bob, but he was very influential with Peter and with the old Brumos racing situation. And he continued that right up till the time he died, I guess. So I went back to racing after Peter died in 1984. I went to work for Billy Dingman out of Orlando, Florida, and racing Pontiac Firebirds and the GT series. And, we had some success. Not as much as I would have liked, but he never would let me do the motors. And, he was using NASCAR type short track motors, and everybody tried to run them at too much time, and then that would cause get holes in the pistons and melt pistons and do all kinds of bad things. Even running a 200-mile race with 1 or 2 pit stops. I don't know how they ever made them last in NASCAR races. I really didn't. And I I did some NASCAR racing with Billy too. He ran Pontiac Grand Prix a little bit, but he found out very quickly that it didn't matter to him free dealerships. He still didn't have enough money to go racing it. So he was a Honda dealer in Melbourne, Florida, and he was trying to build a new dealership. And at the end of the 84 year, 85 year, he wanted me to go over there and see if I could get his dealership open for him. And I did. And then he said, well, just run it for me. So I was the general manager there till the early 90s. And then Charlie Colby and I went in business together. We had Truck City in Melbourne, Florida, and did quite well. We got in when the pickup truck business was just getting started. It did really well for a long time. And then I had always told my wife that because she agreed to go to Florida with me, she didn't ever want to do that. And I said, when you retire from teaching, we'll go back to South Carolina. So we came back to South Carolina in 1999. Supposedly retired, and instead of that, I got myself elected to the county commission. And first, I was election commissioner, and then on the county council, and still on the county council. And I just started a new term this year.
Well, congratulations.
I try to keep myself going. It's been a mighty good life, I can tell you that. There's been some hard spots, with things like Peter's death and other things like that. You got to take the bad with the good. You're going to get some of, no matter how good your life is, you're going to have some problems along the way. So,
when you were crew chief for Brumos, were you limited by a budget to do things, or did you have kind of unlimited budget?
Well, we didn't ever seem to need a big budget. The year we had a lot of money was the year we ran the BMW CSL, which were very good cars, very fast. But they couldn't win a lot because the suspension and such you couldn't keep the cars from getting loose. So we could run very fast in the first part of races, and then it would slow down because it was all over the place. But I did all kinds of things to the Porsches to make them faster and easier to drive. They were much more racer friendly, I would say.
So when you say you made the 911, which was a very wicked car, if you're not familiar with it, because it's very tail happy, what were some of the characteristics that you did to the 911, which I'm very familiar with because I've had bunches of them, to make that car driver friendly, as you say?
Well, it was kind of a progression, beginning with the 73 RSR that the factory gave us for Daytona. And, Penske got one and we got one. And we won, and Penske had engine trouble. So that was kind of the start of me having my way, having influence in the factory. And the factory had some wonderful engineers, and Norbert Singer was always my engineer. He was very instrumental in 917 and a lot of other sports race cars. But he and I could talk comfortably together and talk about, like, for instance, the problem with the oil. I said, we've got cavitation, and we've got to stop that. We're going to make these engines reliable at the RPM that we're turning here in the States. Is, they were not running the cars that way. In Europe, they knew they couldn't. But the Germans had two problems. They had a difficult time handling. One was harmonic, and the other was cavitation. So they didn't cost us money to fix, but I was the one that said we got to do this and this, So that 74 911 RSR was the first car with a plain oil tank, and it's like 2-inch lines running from the oil tank back to the engine, and we didn't ever have any problem. We could run cars. We could run a 24-hour race and then turn around and run a 12-hour race with the same engine. They were bulletproof. If we ever had a problem, it's usually because we made some kind of mistake. There were, once in a while, there were things that happened, like the titanium cylinder head and the studs. They would break, and because that's what titanium does. It's very strong, very light, but it's also brittle.
Brittle, yeah.
So, we had our troubles with that, but I still love the titanium rods that we used, and some of the other things we got that way. But the biggest changes I probably made was the portion of on into the 935 when I finally convinced them that we needed to be able to do something about it. Everybody was lowering the cars, lower it, and never thinking about the fact that when you lowered it like that, you were doing away with your anti-squat and your anti-dive, and you were hurting yourself terrible. So Norbert Singer and I worked out the method for relocating the suspension mounting points, and we made the car rocket ship. I mean, it was pretty incredible. And there were some other problems that I fixed, like when they were using titanium hubs and all that sort of thing. We had problems with the brakes going away and never could decide what it was. I said, well, probably they're getting loose when it gets that hot. So I upped the torque on the studs that hold the hubs in. We never had any problem with that brake. I got the car where it would run with about 2 degrees of camber, 2 degrees of caster. And I think we were the first ones to run positive camber on the outside wheel at Daytona, because if you didn't, you're going to have a tire blow in the banking. And of course, that was before the bus stop. So we were hauling butt. Into that back straightaway, especially with the 935. And it was, we had a 77 935 that we bought when we were at the factory getting our 76 934 and a half. And of course, at that time, we were still having big problems with what everybody called turbo lock.
Mm-hmm.
And I was thinking about that, and I said, no, I don't think that's the problem. I think we got I remember back to the Spider motors where we had terrible flat spots in them if you didn't have the injection nozzles properly adjusted in the carburetor. So I said, I got to looking at the 934 and a half, and I said, well, we had the same thing. We got the butterflies opening this way, but the injectors are over on the flat side of the butterfly. So when you try to open the throttle, it's spraying right on the throttle plate. So I turned all them around and made them work the other way, like the Weber carburetors did. And we didn't have any turbo lag. And so we were beating everybody in 77 with that car. Everybody said we were cheating. But we weren't cheating. We just nobody else did. And so I eventually got the car to handling very well, to stopping very well. Of course, Peter was always easy on brakes and transmissions. And, he learned how to. He was not a race car driver, really, not until he got that 917. And he learned he had to learn how to drive to do anything with that car. And,
when did the 917 come in? That would have been what, 69, 70, 71? When did you guys use a 917?
We had it in 70.
Oh, did you?
71, I think. 71, 70, right in there. Yeah. There's the first version of the Penske car, really.
Okay.
Wasn't as good as the Penske car. And we later on, we got the 5-liter motor, and we got the 91730.
We're talking the Can-Am car now. That's right. I forgot about that one. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, we didn't. The only 917 regular 917 that Peter ever drove was one for Tony Dean at Daytona, but he bought the car with the engine about to let go. We never turn so happy. But there were races where we led from the pole. Nobody could touch us the whole race. It was really pretty amazing. Especially with the 79 car, which was really the end of my career with it, only because, well, for one thing, we were in the process of going all digital, and I'm still an analog guy. I never did. I guess I don't appreciate the digital, the electronics, and all that. But, I mean, I can work with them, but I don't like it. I much like everything analog.
Yeah, analog, as they say.
Yeah, ancient log. Whatever you want to call it.
Ancient log. Yeah. Okay. Well, Jack. Okay. So on the back straightaway before the bus stop there at Daytona, how fast was the 935?
Right at 200, 205, somewhere in that range.
How much?
200.
200?
200, 205.
Okay. And then now the Can-Am car, the 917, that only raced what? Road Atlanta, maybe Watkins Glen, Elkhart Lake, or where all did that car campaign when Peter Gregg was driving it?
We raced it every race we could race it in 70 until what it says 71. Yeah, 71. Because Hurley bought the car from Peter at the end of that year, and then he raced it in 72. The next to the last year in Can-Am.
All right, so you started with Peter Gregg like around 69 then, right? Doing stuff with him, racing then?
Uh-huh.
Okay, so enter Hurley Haywood. Were you there when we had Hurley on the show, he was talking about how it was some little autocross event, and he had just moved down here, was going to school or something like that, and he had his big old sloppy big black Corvette, and he went out there in some autocross and smoked Peter Gregg to the point where Peter Gregg walked up and said, "Hey, you're pretty doggone good. You want to go race with me?" And that's the story that we got. So, you were around back then. What was that like?
That was pretty much it. Hurley was trying to go to now that name is the college in Jacksonville.
Oh, North Florida?
No, it's terrible to be named.
All right, well, no worries. We don't have to worry about that. We went to college in Jacksonville. Okay, go ahead.
So Hurley turned 21 in 1969. So he built a new 911S, and I prepared it for racing because at that time, that was the year he turned 21, and he had to do the 3 driving schools. So I prepared that for them, and they went off and did their driving schools and everything. And then we went to Watkins Glen for the 6 hour and did quite well there. But then we found another problem there. It was a fuel feed with a 29-gallon tank. You couldn't, the fuel would get away from the pickup no matter where you put it. So that was when we started thinking about surge tanks. And got that. All our later cars had surge tanks. We could run the car completely out of gas. We had a reserve, and, all that sort of thing. And I guess one of the biggest things I did was in 77, we were in the first race that IMSA allowed 935, it was at Mid-Ohio. And it was a 3-hour race. So nobody else had a true 935 except us, because we had just bought it off the showroom, so to speak, at Stuttgart. And I fixed it so we could put a 30-gallon can inside a 55-gallon can and use dry ice around it, and did the old Penske trick, and just made the specific gravity go out of sight. I got enough gas in the car for us to do an hour and a half. And normally a 935 would not run an hour and a half. So we won that race, very first 935 race in the U.S. as far as I know. Yeah. That car, we won the Trans Am Championship with, because they wouldn't let us run it in their series. And then, what's his name, the German guy from, let's see, why his name go out of my head. He had a 9:34.5 also, and he protested us in most court after we had won the 6-hour race there, because that was a week before we were going down to Mid-Ohio, and so we had the 935 front nose with us, and 935 parts that we had to take off to do the Trans Am. But we were still running the titanium axles, but and everything else we could, So I kind of lost my train of thought there, but we made it work on that car, and but Charlie Rainbow was the tech guy for IMSA at that time, and we went to Atlanta to test, and he walked around the car, and before it went out on the track, he said, I don't know what you've done to this car, but you're not going to race it in IMSA. So I was, I had channeled the front bumper, it had a big, thick, heavy bumper, and I just cut it up and taken 2 inches out of the bumper and, added on to the bottom of it. And then when I got all done with it, I made a mold, pulled the plug, made a mold, and we had a shop in Jacksonville that was doing the fiberglass work for us, Harry's Custom Fiberglass. He had never done any sports cars. He was doing drag racing stuff. And so we did a lot of business with him. And from then on, we made our own fender flares and our own bumpers and all that sort of stuff. Even made wheel cams like the BBS wheels had. So,
Wow.
Yeah.
Jack, we got a minute or two left, couple minutes left. Who was your stiffest competition team-wise that you raced? Let's say in the 70s, let's say with 935s.
Who was the toughest competition?
Yeah, who was your toughest competitor?
Holbert.
Holbert. Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, I would say without a doubt. Yeah, I mean, he did things like we did. He didn't use a lot of people, and he did things right, and he was a very good driver. So, other than that, we never ever raced other entrants in the race. We just raced ourselves. We prepared the car the best we could and decided how fast we could go and still win, still finish the race. If we won, that was great. If we didn't, well, somebody was faster. So the whole situation very, very simple, actually.
Okay, and then I got to ask you this. Back then, one of the favorites was, besides you guys, was Danny on the gas on Gaius, the Interscope 00 car. How competitive was that car against you guys?
Well, it should have been competitive, but they didn't know what to do to the cars to make them run. And he was a little bit of a lead foot, I think.
Well, he's a drag racer. That's what he was originally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there were a lot of those kind of people. The guys from all the drug guys were kind of that way. They were hard on the equipment, and we just never really had any problems with them beating them. We didn't want to, but just come on.
And then don't forget the Whittington brothers, right? They were around.
Oh yeah, the Whittingtons, and there were some other folks from South Florida that were pretty much into the drug business too.
Yeah, and then of course, what's his name? T-Bird Swap Shop. Now he had some funky car, didn't he? I can't even think of his name right now.
Preston Hen.
Preston Hen, yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm.
Preston Hen was, I think he made his money legitimately. I really do. He had a huge swap shop, and in fact, after Peter died, my number one helper, Mike Colucci, went to work for him.
Oh yeah,
and they were very successful, and I helped them. I remember doing one 24-hour race with them, and we won the race. And had A.J. Foyt and who else? 3 top drivers. I guess over my years, I've raced at least once with most of the top guys. So I think.
I was going to say too, and then I think we got about like 30 seconds left. You guys all did Le Mans together too, right? You were over there on that event.
I never went to Le Mans.
You didn't?
Yeah, there's some other stories behind that, but the main reason I didn't go is it was much cheaper for Peter to get on an airplane and fly over there and drive somebody else's car. And we turned that around and we used the European drivers in our car, like Bob Wallach and people like that. You know, they were very good. So that worked out for us. That was the only way we didn't spend a whole bunch of money.
Interesting.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, the checkered flag just came down, so it's at that time. But Jack, I want to thank you very much for hanging out with us here at Nostalgic Radio and Cars and sharing some of these great stories. Down the road, probably have to get you back on again and tell some more stories. And maybe I'll run into you over at the Brumos Museum. I was there 2 weeks ago, and it was a pretty amazing event. And I actually met Dano Davis there while I was there. So
Okay. He's one of my favorites. He really is.
super guy. Yeah. It's a beautiful museum. If you guys ever get a chance, don't forget to check out the Brumos Museum in Jacksonville. It's open, I think, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, every week. And call ahead of time, make sure. And in the meantime, Jack, you take care. Keep politicking up there. Keep, following races. And I wish you all the best. Thank you very much for hanging out with us.
You know, we had his book. We got ours too. Brumos. Sean Creedland wrote the book for Brumos.
Okay.
So you can put it. Have you not seen that book?
No, I haven't seen it, but I did take pictures of you because there's a whole bunch of, you got a whole little dedication to Jack Atkinson there, your little display that they have with all your accolades.
It's the book, Brumos, an icon, American racing icon, 3 volumes. And it's the whole Brundage family thing right through Dan Davis. Yeah, really great.
Super. All right, Jack, you take care. Thank you very much again.
You're quite welcome.
Okay. Bye-bye. Hey, I want to thank all my listeners for tuning into Nostalgic Radio and Cars. Don't forget to check us out here every Tuesday between 7 and 8 p.m. on the Tan Talk Radio Network. Hey, where's our closing music there? You got to get that break on through to the other side. Anyway, hey, don't forget to follow us on social media. Walter Media is this weekend in Atlanta. Check out FastlaneTravel.com. And in the meantime, everybody stay safe, drive carefully, and love your family.
Try to run, try to hide, break on through to the other side, break on through to the other side, break on through to the other side, yeah.
WTAN, Clearwater.
FM 106.1.
WDCF, Dade City.
FM 102.3.
Listen.
This is CBS News on the Hour, sponsored by Progressive Insurance.
I'm Jennifer Kuiper. Lori Vallow-Daybell is not a lawyer.